If you only knew the power of the dark side.
2, 1, 0.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Michael Burhan for Retro Unlimited Live, nerdgenius.com, Fanboys Anonymous, and all those lovely other little places where you see Michael Burhan, and gaming, of course. And I've got a very special interview today. I've got a very special guest. I'm just going to bring my camera down so you guys can see what I look like. Otherwise, you'll just be seeing my nose. A gentleman by the name of Davis Ray Sickmon Jr. That's a mouthful. So, Davis, tell us about your project, because it's a very fun little game, a very fun little IP that you have entitled Jumpman Forever. How did you get a hold of this?
That's actually a pretty long story. About 13 years ago, I ended up finding the original author of Jumpman, which was Randy Glover. And during that time period, he actually had a couple of different people that were interested in doing sequels to Jumpman. The game right now, as it stands, is 30 years old. It was originally published in 1982 or 1983, and I just basically point blank said I'd like to do a sequel to it. I want to do a commercial sequel to it. Back then, it was mainly just going to be PC and Mac, and got started on the project. And it ended up falling through because I got involved in a couple of other projects that were kind of taking precedent. 3D game called Trajectory Zone, which oddly enough never shipped. It's the only one of 2 games I've ever done that didn't ship. Got into it, and well, time rolled on, and I keep getting emails asking me when I'm going to ship Jumpman, the sequel, and this year, for some reason, it's just, I've got an idea. I know how I want to do this. I want to do something different, but I want to keep everything about the original core gameplay. So started the Jumpman Forever project, which I think I sent you a copy of the preview, for instance.
You did, and I had a very wonderful time. It actually plays, in a sense, like the previous game, and it holds the same kind of like mechanics and gameplay that you're looking at, but the graphics are updated, like in terms of, because I saw the fact that you wanted to localize it onto Android, sort of the iTunes App Store and stuff like that, and it seems very simplistic, very easy to play, and reminds me of the old days of the Atari.
It's really kind of supposed to. Even the graphics, even though it's updated graphics, it's kept in a very retro style, so that it still has that sort of chunky feel to it, rather than the modern. I hate to say it, but a lot of games in the modern era. For instance, the character interaction. The characters sometimes are a little difficult to see across from backgrounds. Jumpman Forever goes back with the original concept of fairly bland backgrounds, so that all the action that's on screen pops very well. So
yeah. So as you know, you got to hold this IP, and usually publishers or developers, for instance, who kind of get rid of their old IPs or license them, usually like to be very hands-on. I think one of the biggest ones in general was Owl Low with the Leisure Suit Larry IP, which I'm not going to go too much into what happened with it, but he was very hands-on when they produced the game Leisure Suit Larry Reloaded, which was produced by a third-party company. How did you manage to sort of escape that, in a sense?
Part of the reason I managed to escape it was at the same time, during that whole time period, at the same time that I was getting ready to start doing Jumpman, actually originally the title was Jumpman 2049, as I was starting to do that, Randy Glover had a neat idea for a 3D version of Jumpman called Jumpman 2. Yeah. So he was producing his own sequel. So a lot of the thought, I think, in his mind was, you know what, if I let him do this, that's going to end up being publicity back for me also. So his Jumpman 2 would have gotten more publicity. At the same time, by the way, there was actually a couple of other little Jumpman games produced, like Jumpman Zero, which was for the Palm OS and PC, Jumpman Under Construction, which never got past beta, A couple others that were also being done at the same time with pretty much the same deal. Hey, here's the rights, have fun with it. The only difference was with mine, I had specifically asked for commercial rights so that I could sell the game rather than having to deal with trying to do just a free distribution. I was making part of my living from game development at the time, and I just couldn't merit doing any free games at that point.
Right. So what, in terms of commercially distributing the game, is the license for you to have like the entire rights to this, so that you can use the franchise specifically for, say, like your for app use, for Ouya use, but when it comes to commercial consoles like the PS3 and Xbox Live Arcade, it's a different story, isn't it?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, and keep in mind, back in 2000, there were slightly different consoles out at the time.
Yeah.
Randy had extended to me basically everything but the rights to do the major consoles. And the reason why, it basically boiled down to this. It was going to cost, for most of the consoles back then, your barrier for entry was about $250,000 for one of the dev kits, and that was basically the minimum to get into it, not including your licensing to actually sell on that platform and everything else. So it's a very expensive venture. If I'm able to throw that much money at it, it does make sense that he would want a split of the cut from that point.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a much bigger undertaking and represented a whole lot more money. Now at the time, Xbox Live Arcade didn't exist. The PS4's indie channel that they're going to be doing, and etc. Those didn't exist.
Yeah, and also Nintendo have got their own channel for stuff like that, but I know they like to be more hands-on. They kind of screen everything that goes through their content stream.
Yeah. So that was the rights we got, and I have not talked to Randy in quite a while, so if I run into him again, it may be one of those things of, could we get the rights to do an Xbox Live Arcade version? I'll split, profits with you. I got no problem with that sort of thinking either.
Yeah.
It was his baby.
Well, if you look at it at the moment, because Xbox One, they literally include the dev kit inside the system.
Yeah.
So they're allowing anybody to sort of develop for the system, and that option could be there for you, But how much does it cost to convert a game, say, from the small platforms? Speaking for someone who's never developed a game in his life, so I couldn't be the best kind of person in terms of actually putting money down on it. But how much would it cost to integrate the game into something like Xbox One?
Well, that all depends entirely upon how you approach the project from the very beginning.
Okay.
Like in my case, what I did was from the very get-go on doing this was I wanted to do it cross-platform so I could support, relatively speaking, any platform that came along that I wanted to throw support at. For me to do it, we're probably talking another $10,000 to $15,000 before I was all said and done. Not including the marketing that has to go into it for a release like that. But it's really a lot less expensive than some of the other approaches. There's some approaches that porting a game like this over to another platform, you could easily throw $50,000 to $100,000 at it. This would not be one of the larger projects. Let's say if they wanted to throw Halo at a new platform, that would be a major undertaking, and talking a couple $1 million at that point.
Okay.
So, scale is a little smaller.
Right. So let me ask you another question then. As an indie developer yourself, are you directly independent based? Because have you ever worked on? Actually, we'll put the question in twofold. I'm trying to sort of like phrase this in a certain way, but more questions are coming up in my mind. As an indie game developer yourself, how do you approach something like this? Because is this a sort of thing that you can make a very good living off of, or do you do other things as well as like programming for independent games?
I'm going to break that answer down into more pieces, because it's not a simple question. I actually am both a contractor for any sort of software development. If it's got a keyboard involved, I do it. I do app development, web development, industrial automation from time to time, and game development under contract basis. I've done a number of game titles where I've been a consultant on, for instance, voice over IP, physics systems, things like that. So I've done a little bit of everything in the field already. I have previously made my living doing this. I got out of the field, back around 2005 originally. I got back into game development. It's kind of, call it a sideline again. Back in 2010 with actually the release of a role-playing game called the Horror Game, which was a dice and paper type game. Then another game called the Plastic Army Game, which is a little tabletop miniatures game done with plastic army men. And then Retro Breaker in 2013, this year, I think. It's kind of fuzzy. This is one of those days where I haven't had a whole lot of sleep. So right now, no, I don't make my living off of it at the moment. My goal is to go back into it again and go back to making my living off of it. It is something you can do. You can make your living off of games like this. It takes a combination of a lot of marketing, a good solid game, and a little bit of luck.
I can imagine. As with anything, because the internet has made everything so accessible nowadays. Because you've got like internet TV, radio shows. Like I Got Gameplays hosted on an internet network with XFI. You have film companies that can actually distribute their stuff through IndieFlix, Netflix, through other like situations such as iTunes, and Blip TV's become sort of more of a dominant TV thing at the moment as well. So is YouTube, in terms of alternatives. So you can see exactly the way that people are approaching these things, and money can be earned as long as you kind of look at the right pathways to go through. And the same things happen for game developing now, because you've got all these accessible, online, downloadable avenues to go through. Like now with the Ouya, for instance, which is the funny thing about that console is that's outsold a lot of the mainstream consoles. The Wii U, I believe it holds actually more pre-orders than the PS4 and the Xbox One. So it's a very big console, but it's also contrived around with a bit of controversy as well, because they've got the they had that sort of match like for like in terms of the game development, as long as you kept your game Ouya exclusive game for, I believe it was up to a year.
6 months.
6 months. So what are you going to be a part of that if your Kickstarter is successful?
Absolutely, and this is sheerly a business decision. Well, I say it's sheerly a business decision. There's a personal decision too. The reason for doing with the fund you're talking about is called the Ouya Free the Games Fund, which is a great idea. A lot of indies had some problems with it. I disagreed with a number of the problems they had, but it's a great idea. Basically, they're going to match it dollar for dollar. We're going for $20,000. When we hit our Kickstarter, they're going to give us $20,000. Actually, they're going to give us $20,000 in 3 payments. The first one is when our Kickstarter makes, they're going to give us the first 25%. When we release on the Ouya, they give us 50%. They wait for 6 months. When it's been an Ouya exclusive for 6 months, then they give you the other 25%.
Okay, so this is not like a system where anyone can sort of like get involved in it, because they have to make sure that there's 3 criteria to meet: the Kickstarter, the release date, and also the 6-month timed exclusive. Yes.
So, and some of the indies were upset because of the amount of money that you have to raise. The minimum that you have to raise is $10,000. To me, it's one of those cases of if you don't think you can raise $10,000, it's a rough thing to go after, but it's just going to require a whole lot of marketing, basically on the social networking side, or talking with folks like you who get the word out.
Of course, and I'm a big fan of independent games. Also, helping anybody who goes kind of through the right way in the right channels of doing so, because a lot of mainstream developers at the moment are kind of, I would say, manipulating, in a sense, their core audience in order to gain what they want, like Capcom with their stance on, well, we do what we like. We don't care if you want another Mega Man. We're not producing another Mega Man. Or,
right.
You know, and the whole controversy that's going on with Concept at the moment, who I actually myself have backed this Mighty Number 9 thing, but there's a huge controversy going on with a person working with Concept, which we don't need to go into here, but they have that going on, and also like a lot of mainstream developers looking towards these Kickstarter schemes in order to like raise funds for certain game franchises. I know there was one who wanted to produce a franchise of Super Ghouls and Ghosts, and they never even talked to Capcom about it. And with those things, people get a bit sketchy about Kickstarter because they don't know if they're gonna, you know, if what they donate towards they get a say in, because you know you've got a lot of people donating this money. They're not, it's you don't get a piece of the pie. For instance, they all they get is a copy of the game and a thank you, you know, and some extra little bonuses as well.
Yeah.
But in a sense, they need to know that they can put something out there which is worthwhile. And for guys like, I'll name one of the huge internet celebrities at the moment who loves Atari-based games, ColecoVision-based games, and that's Gamester81, John Gamester, who's a big fan of this. So you found a very viable and niche market in a sense as well, and especially with the Ouya, because everything is downloadable. So you can get it on day of release. You don't have to wait for it. Can I ask, have you looked at a price structure? Do you know what price it's going to be?
I'm going to keep it really cheap. Really, what I'm kind of shooting for right now is $3.99 across all the platforms, which will 6 months after the Ouya version is out, it'll end up being iOS, Android, PC, Mac, and Ouya will be the Phase 1 and Phase 2 supported platforms. There may be more in the future, like Windows Mobile and a couple of those. There's also some other micro consoles coming out, like GameStick, that might be an option, but we're just kind of keeping an eyeball to see what's out there. But I want to keep it cheap. I want to, $3.99 is a pretty good price point. It's low enough most people can just pick it up and not have to worry about it.
Okay,
Plus,
so
it's downloadable. So
let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter then. With the Kickstarter itself, how because you've already met, the last time I checked, half your quota on this, nearly.
Not quite.
So how did you initially start this Kickstarter up? What kind of intrigued you about that funding model?
I starting the Kickstarter. I will admit, I did not know enough about Kickstarter marketing when I started. It's changed really quickly, fortunately, but when I started the Kickstarter, I started it up, and really pretty much nothing happened. Now, I did, up front, I created a couple of commercial level rewards. There's 4 splash screen pages, for instance, that are for sale or that are rewards, and I sold one of those. I mean, that was the really the big kickoff for it was 2 days, 3 days after it, I think it was. I sold one of those. But the thing is, I had already started talking to companies, trying to convince them to get in on the deal from the very beginning. I'm talking to them about, look, the original game, 30 years later, there's still people talking about it, and still people who remember this game. How about an advertising platform for you that 30 years from now somebody might still be talking about? So that was our first stop, was to try and get some of those big fish. And we got one. We've got another that's supposed to come on board, but they haven't happened yet. Yeah. Which is, when they do it, they do it. Of course, they've only got 6 more days to do it in, so hopefully they hurry up. Yeah. So that was our first stop, which was a mistake, though. It was great to get the big fish on board. The problem is that meant that I ignored all the avenues I was needing to be following for the smaller contributors, and that's kind of hurt us a little bit. We're catching up now. As we're talking, there's another person who's contributed. But I really should have gone after the small, the $2 and $10 donation, or not donations, contributions to the project first. Yeah. And then went after some of the big fish. I ended up talking to an old student of mine from I had one time taught a web development class. he went on to go into marketing and things like that. And he's like, "Oh, you should have started your marketing process for this 5 months ago."
Yeah, that is kind of true when it comes to marketing something. That with games, with anything, even if you're like marketing a film, you've got to make sure that you're out there and people know about your product probably 5 to 6 months before the product even gets released. And a lot of it, it's a mistake that a lot of the big companies are making as well now, because they'll just fly out a release date for a game and stuff like that. But there are other ways to do it. You could have, I'm surprised that there hasn't been any betas of the game being released to sort of gaming channels and stuff.
Which we're fixing that right now as of today.
Of course, I've got my copy, so I'm going to be doing a Let's Play probably tomorrow to show people exactly what the game is about, the mechanics, the way that the game flows, and even do a bit of a comparison between the old game and this one. And it's a thing at the moment where I look at this and I think to myself, it's common to do it through this avenue, because Kickstarters are very, in terms of the way that they deal with these online fundraising, they're sort of all or nothing. Where if you went to a company like Indiegogo, you could have, even if you've raised like $7,000, you would have got that $7,000. So I'm wondering what kind of brought you to this model. Is it because of the fact that it's was the bigger of the other model of the other companies that deal with this, or was it the name value?
A couple of things actually. The Ouya Free the Game Fund, for instance, requires that it has to be a Kickstarter. It can't be a Indiegogo. So since that was one of our goals, well, that made a huge difference. Two, if it's not all or nothing, all or nothing changes how you deal with a situation. All or nothing means, you know what, it's not going to be good enough for me to get $7,000. I'm going to have to keep busting hump and hit that mark that we've set. With Indiegogo, there's the possibility, well, we got this far, so, that's good enough, I guess. No. With this, we have to do it. We have to go, and it's worthwhile.
Okay.
To have that mentality.
Let me ask you a question then, sort of segueing from that a little bit. What got you into gaming in the first place? What made you decide that this is what you wanted to do?
I was a kid, and I played in 1983. I played this game called Jumpman. I'm not kidding. That's actually part of my history of why I wanted in game development. The Atari 2600. There was a couple of games for it that I just thoroughly enjoyed, to the point of I thought, when I get the chance, this is going to be what I do. And I ended up, I actually did write some stuff for the Commodore 64, but never released it. It was amazing because it was very accessible back then. Just the publishing channels were really hard to do.
Yeah.
As time rolled on, it was the late 90s when I finally kind of got the, you grow up with that whole thing of people telling you you can or you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Well, you can't make a living doing that. Game developers, it's such a silly field to be in. And it was games like Quake and Doom and some of those that made me look at it and go, what the hell am I listening to these people for?
Yeah, that's true. If you look at ID's history, Doom was shareware.
Yes. Yes.
It was released. I remember being a kid at school and going into we had this local PC share library, and I would go in and I'd be playing Doom on this machine because someone had programmed a DOS-based version onto this system without letting the teachers know. So I was playing this and mowing down monsters and stuff like that. And I remember this game where you could literally put a copy onto the disc, go home and play it on your system, and it floated like that, and it caught on fire that way. And because there was a need for console-based versions of this, ID managed to port it over to console and made a lot of money doing so. So it can work, and I've said this to like a million different people about this, and to everybody out there who watches my YouTube channel, who listens to I Got Gameplay, anything's possible. Even with the current standing, what's going on in YouTube and the way Let's Players are being treated, kind of like redheaded stepchilds by YouTube itself, there's still a way to do it, and there's still platforms to do this. And if you really are serious and you really love what you do, there's always a way around it. And there's always a way to accomplish it. And 9 times out of 10, the buck stops with you, not anybody else.
Absolutely. The number of people I've known that wanted to get into game development, they started to learn it a little bit. They thought that this is cool, and then I watched them just completely burn out on it because they realized, one, it's a lot more work than they thought. So that fail was completely on them. Or they get to the point that they're thinking about releasing it, and they end up flopping because they don't do any marketing, which, by the way, used to be one of my MOs. Write game, release game, move to next game. Never do that marketing phase. But in the in the late 90s, early 2000s, actually, you could almost get away with that with a lot of the shareware sites and things like that.
Yeah.
Discovery was a little easier for the PC platform. But anyways, absolutely. A lot of people's failure has a lot to do with them and their mindset rather than the situation around them. And there's been plenty of indies who've proved that even, I'm not going to call them a trivial game, but an oddball, unique, strange little game that nobody could ever possibly be interested in, like Radical Fishing, can actually end up being a hit if you start building up your base of fans and you do a good, solid release.
Yeah, again, like Rovio with the Angry Birds saga of games, because they when they originally released it, there was no one knew about it. It was just this funny little app that everyone loved playing, and it's and as someone myself who predominantly I kind of use app games just for toilet gaming. I'll just sit there on the loo playing with my phone, or if I've got an appointment, I'm waiting on a waiting room, I'll play with my phone. It's a fun thing to do because those games are kind of designed for that. But in this case, sort of Jumpman has layers to it because there's differences from playing it, say, on your phone, for instance, than playing it on a system. Which for those of you who don't know, I'm pointing to my systems that are right across the room from me. But let's dig a little bit deep into yourself as a developer. Obviously, you've come sort of from programming background, and as you said, you have that mentality of programming a game, putting it out there, and just leaving it. Did you ever have those instances? Did you ever use your talents or hone your talents on big time indie projects or big companies that you've worked for?
I've worked for either directly or indirectly when it comes to industrial automation and things like that. I've worked for some of the world's largest companies as either a subcontractor or through another company, Cargill, companies like that. So some of my programming talents do come from that sort of area. I've worked with other indie projects, but a lot of the indie projects are. Hi there.
Having an interview. Yeah, ladies and gents, for everyone that's listening in, this is my mother. Hello.
Hi, Mom.
Hello.
How are you today?
This is David's Ray. Sickmon Jr. He's a developer for a game, and I'm talking to him at the moment. We're having a live interview. You're on air. You're online.
Nice.
Our viewers are watching you. So, while she continues, let's talk about like your instance though. My mother, everybody, and let's talk about that for a second. So we're talking about your history and the companies that you've worked with. How did that affect things differently in terms of what you've done as a developer yourself?
A lot of it has to do with how I approach situations from a mental standpoint, from a design standpoint. Industrial automation is a do not fail sort of venture.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about an ammonia system, for instance, an ammonia cooling system, you mess that up, it explodes. I mean, like really big explodes. So my idea of what is acceptable and unacceptable for design stuff is a little bit different than somebody who this is their second time they've done any programming. I've done web development, so I get a lot of idea on good interaction for user interfaces. I've done game development before, so I've got kind of a feel for how players deal with games. I actually owned a LAN gaming center for 2 years. In fact, I wrote a book about it. I owned a LAN gaming center. So I got to watch on a day-to-day basis players as they're interacting with games and what really kind of sets them off and what gives them more enjoyment. I've dealt with just a little bit of everything, so it doesn't matter really what I want to approach. I've already got a mindset where I can think ahead and kind of deal with it.
How does it differ though from like working from a big development company or being contracted to work on these big companies, as to owning your own IP and owning your own company? Because as you said before, like with a lot of game developers, a lot of people who get put onto these projects, you do the project, it gets done, and then passed over to the other parties who basically will then sell the IP on, or like mass market it in order to get it out there to the consumer.
Well, here's the first problem.
Yeah.
It is harder to motivate yourself to do your own project than to do somebody else's. We are, here in the U.S. at least, we are so trained to follow that carrot on a stick that we call a paycheck that it becomes difficult when you're having to pay your own paycheck to stay motivated. I have really, right now I'm trying to finish up a couple of other projects I've got going on, so I've got a good solid 2 months clear before I have to deal with anybody else's projects to get Jumpman Forever done. But that means that I have to plan my resources. This Kickstarter is a good portion of that, for instance, along with paying for some more graphics and things like that and some audio development. It's also going to have to pay part of my paycheck for a couple of months while I get the Ouya version out, and then a couple more months while I get the PC, Mac, iOS, and Android version good, stabilized, tested, and out the door. Well, it's very easy to get distracted when somebody holds up another paycheck and says, well, how about you come do this project for me instead?
Mm.
Well, that means I'm having to drop my own project, go on, and then come back. With Retro Breaker, for instance, when I did it for iOS, Android, and Mac, which I still need to release the PC version one of these days, when I did it, I literally picked a game style I could do in such a short period of time. I knew there wasn't going to be any economic teases hanging over me to distract me from getting it done. I knew I could get it done within about a 2-week span and have it released.
Yeah.
So it's a lot harder to deal with keeping motivated and keeping on track.
So as you said, you obviously yourself, someone with your sort of skill values, you probably get a lot of people requesting jobs from you. How, like, as you said, with your own IP, it's a whole different story. But also noting the fact, because you deal with these sort of independent developed games and producing this IP yourself, putting it out there to other people, because you probably have your own graphics person who deals with the graphics for the game, and then your own audio guy. How many paychecks do you actually pay out in terms of the development of this game? Is it just the 3 of you, or more than that?
Actually, I don't actually have an answer for that yet. I had an audio guy on the hook, and then he wandered off. So, for instance, that one right now is deferring back to me. I've got to find yet another person to pick up. And oddly enough, it's not the sound effects that I need somebody for so much as the music. It's a very specific thing that I'm looking for. So there'll be that. I want to bring on another 2 level designers before the game is done and over. Jumpman levels are kind of weird to deal with because I have such a different mentality from other platform games. Basically, they're evil and twisted. That's the best way to say it. So getting somebody with that mindset, because there's only, inside of me, there's only going to be so many evil, twisted levels I can come up with before I finally, go to the till one of these days and I'm like, I got nothing. So there'll end up being a couple of level designers that are going to contract in. I've already identified 1 out of 2 that I'm going to use. I need to farm out some more artwork again, so there'll be another set of paychecks there that I have to deal with. A lot of the artwork actually is done in-house by me. but not all of it. For instance, Jumpman's run sequence, I hate it. I absolutely hate that appearance. It looks lopsided. On the other hand, the rest of his animations I like just fine. So I need to find an artist whose style I like and pay out on that. I need to do some marketing. Well, there's going to be a whole lot of checks when it comes to the marketing side, to Facebook, to a lot of the gaming sites for ads, things like that. Because even I'm trying to avoid this time around doing all right, game's done, release it. I want to do another game. I'm putting back in the marketing phase this time.
Yeah.
Like I should. And that gets expensive.
What I remember you were talking about Jumpman 2 or the Jumpman 0, the trippy 3D version of Jumpman. What kind of differed you from going more into the old school style of the way that Jumpman was produced, as to the way that it was done in the 3D version?
I didn't think Jumpman 2. I feel really. It's one of those privileged things. Randy Glover gave me a couple of builds at one time of Jumpman 2 as it was going along, so I actually one of the few people in the world that ever got to play it.
Yeah.
I never felt it was the right approach for me. He was breaking new ground in how to deal with a 3D world, which is really actually a succession of 2D worlds that, for lack of a better term, get interfaced through in a 3D fashion. It's very hard to describe.
Yeah.
I never felt that was a good approach, but I also never wanted to see doing Jumpman as kind of a Mario World game. It wasn't going to work. It's just not the right genre. It's too precise. So I could never see doing that. And like Jumpman 0 with its, as I've described, as 3D trippy quality. Jumpman 0, despite its 3D stuff, is very, very close to the core of Jumpman when it comes to gameplay. In fact, there's only one level that 3D actually ever came into play, which was the final level. So it's, I very much wanted to stick with the classic and go from there.
So the one big thing I would like to ask about this is, what do you see, if you do get the money for this and it goes out and it sells well, where do you see yourself afterwards? Well, are you going to be looking at more original IPs, or are you going to try and gain rights to sort of co-mingle the Jumpman universe, bring that out to a bigger release, and look at more nostalgic games for yourself?
What I'm probably going to do, there's actually a loose sort of plan already in place, and this Jumpman Forever is the one and only Jumpman I'm going to do, as far as I know. I mean, don't hold me to that.
Yeah.
If I managed to get a hold of Randy and said, well, let's do Jumpman 2 after all, that might be a different story. As a matter of fact, actually, Randy abandoned Jumpman 2, and during the process that he was kind of getting away from doing it, him and I had actually talked about collaborating on doing Jumpman 2.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible. But I find it unlikely. And I'm setting Jumpman Forever up to be a game where I don't have to, that I don't need to write another sequel. When I'm done, the level editor, the file sharing community, the ease for me to update and add more levels down the line prevents me from having to worry about doing more sequels, which I understand some people in the game industry would look at me in absolute horror when I say I'm trying to write a game that I don't have to worry about for 10 years.
So you're basically
not going to
looking
do
at
it
something that's more, you're looking at something that's more timeless, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah, it's not often you try and set out to create a, quote, timeless classic.
Yeah.
But that's really what I'm kind of trying to do. So the next one that I'm really looking at is going to be an original IP, but it's going to be based around an old set of game styles, which is Gauntlet and Gauntlet 2. And part of it, and honestly, part of the reason why I want to do it is sheer annoyance. I've seen a number of games that somebody has compared to, well, it's like a modern Gauntlet. That is not a modern Gauntlet. I'm sorry, what you just did is just another Zelda-style RPG with some stats and a lot of monsters. Apparently, if you throw a lot of monsters in there, that's when it becomes a Gauntlet clone. And I'm like, no, you missed what that's about. So I don't know if you've ever seen on my site, one of the things I've done with Jumpman is I started a series called Deconstructing a Classic, which is a set of articles that go through, and I've got to release number 3 hopefully today, that go through and break down what is the core of the gameplay for this. And I'm going to be doing the same thing for Gauntlet. And I'm going to do a lot of comparison with existing games that have been compared to Gauntlet, and try and show what the difference between what it was that we experienced back in the arcade or on the consoles back then compared to what it is we experience now, and why Gauntlet works so well. Part of the thing that people forget is that Gauntlet was weighted so that you lose.
Yeah.
Modern Gauntlet type games, for lack of a better term, are weighted so that you win. Well, if you change that a little bit, that's another thing. So it's probably going to be the next one we do. I won't guarantee it, but that's probably the next plan.
So let's talk a little bit about, because there's always a huge subject in terms of gaming, the female protagonist that you've actually integrated into this game, because you've made it a 2-player game, and you can have you have an option to play 1 or 2 characters. My question kind of on this one is twofold. Why a separate female character, in your own words, and secondly, what made you to go and do a 2-player functionality? Is it local? Is it online multiplayer? Or is it just something that you put in there and thought, well, Jumpman never had a 2-player game, so this time we're going to do something different?
I'll start with the second character. When I was working with the ideas behind Jumpman Forever, I had considered the idea of doing multiple Jumpmen, and each one of their color schemes would have been based off of the original consoles. They were consoles, computers that they've shipped on. Mm-hmm. Well, the problem is if you look at like Apple IIs, it's white. Entire Jumpman is white. Atari 2600, the entire Jumpman was white. ColecoVision's Jumpman Jr., it was yellow. The Commodore 64 is the only one that had any character to it. It had 3 colors it was working from. So I kind of felt that was a fail. And the other thing is I felt it lacked a little something. Now, completely separate, when I was looking at the possibility of how I was going to finance doing Jumpman Forever, I had looked at doing what I would consider to be a prequel, set in the same kind of universe, which was the working title for it was Control Issues, which would have been, for lack of a better analogy, Doodle Jump meets Jumpman. The character in question ends up getting a hold of a set of jump boots which are malfunctioning. They don't stop jumping, so it gives you the little Doodle Jump platform climb thing. Though I was going to throw quite a bit of puzzle element to it. The problem is I got playing the game, and all it really made me want to do was play Jumpman, honestly. I felt it was such a half measure towards what I really wanted to do that I ended up abandoning the game. Because I didn't want that to actually be a Jumpman game, I created a different character for the universe, and that was the character really didn't actually originally have a name. It was just Red, who was a female character. As I'm doing Jumpman Forever, I looked at the idea of multiple characters. I threw away the idea of multiple characters, and I'm looking through my graphic sets that I have laying around, and there's that character Red. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. What if I took this and did this? Well, okay, what does it provide? What does it do in the game that makes any difference? Because to me, that's everything about this is gameplay is king. If it doesn't improve gameplay, if it doesn't do something different for the player, why have it? I started looking at the idea, and I was like, okay, well, what does she have that he doesn't? Because I'm not going to throw a female character in, for instance, just to be who Jumpman's supposed to rescue. Who cares? Jumpman doesn't really have a serious defined set of goals beyond defuse bombs. There's never been any go save Pauline like the original Donkey Kong or anything like that. So as I looked at it, I was like, well, what if I set her in a completely different space station? Gave her a set of jump boots, but she, for instance, can't disarm bombs. Suddenly I changed the game. I kept the core ideas. The puzzle work that happens on the fly during a Jumpman game, kept those core ideas, but I threw it in such a twist that all the assumptions the players have had at that point are gone. Now you end up with something completely different that still plays the same.
So how does she do the exact same thing that Jumpman does? If she can't disarm bombs, how do the bombs get disarmed?
She doesn't. That's the big thing. The first station that she's on, it's not going to be safe. She's just getting away.
I see.
And there is, okay, Jumpman has never had a very heavy plot line. In fact, when I was talking to Randy Glover, I don't remember what it was I had asked. He said, yeah, that was just copy that the marketing guys at Epix wrote. There was no plot line for the game. There was no alienators or anything. No, because if you ever read the Epix manual for it, it was referred. They were the alienator terrorists.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Nobody really actually knows what that's supposed to mean. Anyways, so as I'm going through, there's a loose sort of plot line, and one of the plot lines is the first station that she's on gets lost.
Yeah.
Her job is to get away, not to save it. She does interact, and I'm not going to reveal all of it yet. She does end up interacting with the bombs in a way that Jumpman doesn't. It's just she can't disarm them.
Oh, I see. So it's a different kind of gameplay as well. So it's kind of an alternative variation of gameplay as per what Jumpman would do.
Yes. And the other thing is they don't share the same levels. Jumpman has a set, she has a set, and as I release more level sets, they're released as being based on station names. So there's Jupiter Station. That's the first one that Jumpman starts on. The first one that she starts on is Saturn Station, and then there's different ones named down the line. Yeah, I just lost my point. There was a point I was getting to make, and I just lost it.
Well, she has her different sets of stations. He has his different sets of stations. So do they ever commingle? Do they ever have a multiplayer where that you can actually play both characters in the same station?
That's what I'm hoping for. And if you look at the Kickstarter, it lists multiplayer as being experimental. The question becomes, what level of multiplayer are we supporting? For the Ouya, for instance, I really badly want Red and Jumpman playing on the same screen because it's just going to absolutely rock. The sort of puzzles and things like that can be set up when the two characters have different interactions with the same screen elements will be quite fantastic. The question becomes, though, whether or not we don't know yet. And this may be something I actually farm out to somebody else, is whether or not we can make multiplayer fast enough and precise enough, because Jumpman tends to be a very tight control situation.
Yeah.
If we can get it the way we want, then we may do online multiplayer also. But we'll definitely be doing same device multiplayer on Ouya, PC, and Mac.
Yeah.
And it may just be Bluetooth on the mobile devices.
So let me ask, is it costly to introduce online multiplayer onto games like this?
Can be. It depends on how it's executed. For instance, if we're doing online multiplayer with a matching server, well, there's a monthly overhead cost of having the matching server running. If we do multiplayer where you send an invite directly to the player, then you may not have to worry about the matching server. There's all the overhead of extra code that you're dealing with and all the development on it. You've also got to deal with all the testing that goes into it. Does the Android device talk nicely to the iOS device? Does that talk nicely to the Mac? Because we're trying, everything that we do, we're trying very hard to make sure that it's all cross-platform. I want to be able to pick up this device, and I want it to work with my Android tablet over here too. I want them to be able to all talk.
So, yeah, if you were going to do online multiplayer, you'd want it to be on instead of a device to device, say like Ouya to Ouya, you'd actually look at having it post Android platform, so on every single Android platform, and making sure that every one of them talk to each other.
As much as we can. There'll be some Android phones. There's some Android phones that are produced so cheaply out there that, heck, there'll be some of them that are looking, try and run Jumpman Forever, and I'm going to get complaints because it's too laggy or it's too slow. The higher end ones, a lot of Samsungs and HTCs on the higher end of the scale, we'll definitely be trying to test against all of those. Just because, the broader base that we test against, the better off we are.
Okay. Because the one thing that kind of frustrates me as a gamer in general is, like, I own a Wii U, for instance, and with the Wii U, they rarely have any online multiplayer. Some people are like, oh, but there's Miiverse, and it's like, yeah, but that's this thing. That's all it does, you know. You talk to people online, you congregate online with others, but you can't actually play your games online together. So, say if I'm playing Mario Brothers, I can't play New Mario Brothers U with someone online who's playing another one of the characters. So it causes a bit of friction because you don't have that sort of versatility. Whereas local multiplay is always there, so I can play with my kids or with my family members if I want to, which is kind of a different story in a sense. Now, with something like this, I think if you had something like online multiplayer, do you think it would change the way that the game is seen, or do you think it's just something that conditionally it could basically help the game, but it's not essential?
It's a hard one to answer. It all will depend upon the community. If online multiplayer takes off, it's going to be because there's just enough people that felt that was a great idea. Honestly, it's so hard to predict. Really, there's been a number of games. I've actually done some development on a couple of indie games that multiplayer was involved. And really what it looked like was, an old west town with tumbleweeds blowing across it. There was nobody there. Nobody ever got interested in multiplayer in it. So it could be the same thing here, for all I know. And our goal is, with the multiplayer stuff, is we'll get all the single player stuff solidified and solid, and then we'll start working with the multiplayer first on the on device 2-player game, and then we'll start looking at the multiplayer out there. So. It's going to be one of those interesting things that I don't really know how well it's going to be accepted.
Okay. One last thing then, from the gaming perspective, because I want to learn a little bit more about you, of course. But from the Kickstarter perspective, I'm going to give you time to sort of pitch this to people. Tell them why they should be funding this project. What makes it different from any other Kickstarter that's out there?
There's a whole lot of retro gaming Kickstarters out there. Most of them are actually, for lack of a better term, faux retro gaming. There's a couple of them I absolutely love. For instance, oh man, I just forgot the name of it. I played it on my Mac a number of times. I love the heck out of it. That uses its idea of retro gaming is a bunch of big chunky pixels.
Yeah.
Well, that's not really what makes a retro gaming experience. Go back, and part of the reason why I wrote this whole series of articles called Deconstructing a Classic, we're going back and we're actually matching the core thing. Jumpman climbs platforms. Instead of the modern thing for a platform game where you hit the side of the platform and you kind of slide off, no, it climbs the platform just like the original did. It handles ropes just like the original did. We did everything we could so far. In fact, there's still more tweaking to go to get all of those little gameplay core bits to be dead on feeling for what a true retro experience should have been. And we brought it forward instead of, yes, we did use big chunky graphics. We did that because it matches what the original was. This is not a faux Kickstarter from, and I hate to say this, I'm a real jerk for saying it. It's not a retro Kickstarter from somebody who's done no games before and has a very poor chance of shipping a game anytime soon. And I have to admit, by the way, for Kickstarters, I am biased. I will tend to support the idea of a guy who's released a couple of games over somebody who's never done it before. So, but that's why, because we're bringing the whole thing to the table as a true retro experience, and we've done games before.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. In a sense, as you know, I've gone through looking at a couple of Kickstarters that have been going on, including the very renowned one of Smosh, and no hate towards the duo, but they wanted to do a a game specifically on a thing they called Epic Food Fights, and it was an app game. They wanted 20 grand for this app game. No one knew why. No, it wasn't even 20 grand. It was 250 grand, I think it was. It's like $250,000. It was funded, but no one understood why. They couldn't explain why they were doing it, what it was about. Just, we were going to get this game out there, and this is how much it's going to cost us. And it was a very weird experience, because I myself didn't donate to it because I didn't trust it. It was like, if you can't give me information, which is one thing that I can say the Jumpman Kickstarter has done. It's given us all the information, exactly what you're going to do, how you're going to port this to the systems, and give people the amount of info that they need about the game. And of course, like, the beta test is going to be out, hopefully get a bit more out there for guys and gals who want to sponsor this, because it seems very intriguing. As someone who's in a very old school game myself, I have my ColecoVision and my Atari 2600 attachment to it that I just put in my games. My first experience of Donkey Kong was on the ColecoVision, and that was with very minimal graphics. And if you look at this game, it's very nostalgic in that sense. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that you're one of these guys that know what you're doing. From a programmer standpoint, from someone who's actually been within the game industry, how many years have you been in the industry for, Dave?
Let's see. I started into game development in 1999. About 2 years after that was the first Indie Games Con in Eugene, Oregon, that I was one of the speakers there, and I spoke for the next 3 years there, which of course was a big connection point with other developers who were doing 3D indie games based around the Torque engine back in those days. So I did indie game development until 2005, stepped out of the industry because of another business I was involved in. So there's 6 years right there, and then stepping back into the industry in 2010, so another 3-4 years there.
So you're looking at basically 9 years,
Yeah.
nearly 9-10 years. That's a big thing, and the industry itself, and understandably, has grown since. It's changed. The direction of the industry has changed so much now. A lot of companies are sort of steering towards downloadable content and extending the lives of certain games, and their online facilities where the old school sort of way of doing it was, we'll put a game out, there's your game, play your game, we may do a sequel eventually if it's any good. We may not, that's on us, blah blah blah. Yeah. There you go. So let's talk a little bit about you then, in terms of we know how the reason why you're passionate about games, why you've got into the industry itself, but what is it about programming a game that that makes you want to do this?
It's world creation. Might be one way of thinking of it. I also do. I'm also a writer. I've got a couple of published things out there. Nothing great, and nothing to worry about picking up and reading anytime soon. But there's a process involved with it. It's telling a story. Yeah. The same goes for doing TV or movies or anything else. Anybody who's in a creative process like that needs to use the process of telling stories one way or another. It's very addictive. It really is. And so once you get started with something like I don't care if it's a puzzle game or at the other end of the scale, an epic storytelling game like Halo. There's an addiction level to getting involved in those sort of creative processes. So once you're in, it's kind of with you for life. I stepped out of, like I said, I stepped out of the industry in 2005, and I kept going, I really should go back and pick up this design and finish it one of these days, because I really got something I want to do here. Or, the next game idea, or et cetera, et cetera. There was always another thought in the back of my head. There's a game to be told here, So it's a process that, it's just addictive, is what it is.
Well, what made you leave the industry in the first place? Let's talk about that just a little bit.
I left. Wow, is this a long story? A buddy of mine got involved with a LAN gaming center, and there was this guy who supposedly had all this money, and he convinced my buddy to go in with it on starting this whole LAN gaming center. Back this is 2004, and they didn't have anybody to do marketing. Well, I know, hilarious. I don't market my own products. I teach other people how to do marketing. That's part of some of the web services I do, part of some of the app services I do, it's part of some of the programming, which is to jump down people's throat and say, look, you've got to do this or you're not going to sell anything.
Yeah, like on SEOs and stuff like that, just basically to bring out your online presence and association with tagging and other little bits and pieces. Yeah, I'm very familiar with it, even though in my sense as well, I'm very bad at it.
It's amazing how when it's your own product, the cobbler's children have no shoes is one of the phrases I've heard for it. You don't do it for yourself, but when somebody else throws a check at you or you're helping somebody else, you'll happily handle that marketing stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so in 2004 they brought me on, and all I was supposed to do was handle some marketing for them. That was it. Just consult a little bit, a little here, a little there. I think it was 3 or 4 months in. I was already hip deep into this company. Ended up becoming a partner. Eventually, ended up becoming the owner. The problem is that it was something that was always felt on the cusp of we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, and we never quite made it happen the way it should. But it meant that it was eating all of my time. I just did not have time for game development anymore. I was sitting at the store or doing working on the accounting or working on the next marketing thing or what have you, 18 hours a day. So, and getting very little sleep. So I ended up having to step out of the industry because of that. And that was my big thing. I also kind of got tired of, it's horrible. I kind of got tired of the whole contract portion of doing it. And again, as I mentioned before, a lot of times you get that whole thing where it's, you start not doing the games that you were wanting to work on because somebody else was offering a check. The problem is that somebody else offering a check is asking you to do something that you're not really passionate about. You're just doing it for the money. Well, if you're never doing your own stuff, you're never going to have your own stream of money. So, So by the time 2005 rolled around, I didn't have the time. I wasn't doing projects I was passionate on, and it was just time to go.
Yeah, I can imagine because the stigma sort of weighs you down to a certain degree. I myself have been in situations where you do certain things for the money, you really want to stick with them, and then you're like, I can't do this anymore because the passion's not there. And what I always tell everybody, anyone that will listen, in terms of anything you do, you have to be passionate about it. Otherwise, eventually, you're just going to burn out.
Absolutely.
So, in terms of that, let's go back into the whole gaming development side. How are you able to sort of sustain yourself while you develop these games? Is it because you take small projects here and there and that keeps you going, or
basically yes. It's always been either stuff that I worked on the side for myself or very small game projects. A lot of the game projects I did back in early 1999. My first game project was a little puzzle game called Boulder Panic. Yeah. And it was something I just developed it on the side. It was an hour here, an hour there over the process of 2.5 months, I think, 2.5, 3 months before I shipped it. And the first one was absolute POS. I hated it. But it got me in there and got me motivated to start looking at it and go, okay, what went right, what went wrong? Great, I just lost my train of thought. So somebody texted me and I was like, "Oh, what's that?"
Yeah, you're saying it was a POS because you weren't very happy with the game in general. So why was that?
a lot of it was inexperience on my part. Having never done a game development release before, it's like, oh, well, this should be easy. Well, I'll slap together some graphics, I'll slap together some sound, and I'll have a game, and I'll sell the game.
Yeah.
And I slapped it all together, and I looked at it and went, the gameplay is okay. It's not great, nothing special. But man, the graphics suck and the sound sucks. You know what? We're going to release it anyways, because I'm going to find out how the marketing works. And so when I had released that first version of it and started selling copies, not like anything big. I think the original release of it I sold maybe 100 copies. So in the 90s or late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of the stuff I was doing, there'd be a little contract gig over here, but for quite a while, a lot of it, I was paying my mortgage payments with the game development stuff. So it was working out all right. Once you have a certain level of momentum, it's easier to maintain. If you have a level of success and sell, let's say you make $20,000, $30,000 off of game sales in a year, that can make all the difference of whether or not you have the time to focus to get more games out, plus the ambition to do it. Let's face it, money is a great motivator. If you're making money and you're passionate about it, you become very motivated to keep doing it.
Yeah, because you don't want to stop, do you?
Yeah, exactly. So like this time around right now with Retro Breaker, that was self-financed and just had to basically sat down, did it, plowed through it in about 2 weeks, and that was all stuff that I financed out of my own pocket.
So how do you get these games published, though? Do you do it off your own back, or do you sell it on to third-party publishers?
Own back. And I'll be honest, I really... my experience with dealing with publishers has been nothing but negative. Back in the early 2000s, for instance, I still have, sitting in the drawer over here, I still have a contract with a company who was going to publish 3 of my games in a package. And they were excited. They wanted to do this. It was good pricing for me. It was going to end up being very, very profitable, in theory. The problem is they never followed through, to the point that I'm talking to them every week. We're keeping status line updates, et cetera, and then pretty soon it slipped to it was a month till I heard from them.
Yeah.
And then they're like, well, we're doing a little restructuring. Okay, what does that mean? And then 6 months later, I finally get an email from them. Well, we finally decided we were not going to go that direction. Well, what they did is they burned a whole lot of my time. If I'm going to burn some time or make less profit, I'm just going to do it through myself. Obviously, the app stores and things like that are their own marketing channel, but they're not really truly marketing. Unless Apple happens to pick you up and call you the game of the week, the app store is not really a marketing channel. You still have to do all the rest of it yourself. It's just distribution.
How much did it cost you to get the game development kits that they have, the app development kits that they have? Or do they hand those things out for free? To
become an iOS developer costs $100 a year. Cost me $100 a year for Mac developer and certificate to do the App Store. Cost me $100 a year for Mac. I actually have a BlackBerry license still. Android doesn't cost me anything. Windows doesn't cost anything. That's just the certificates to get through the app stores. Amazon was supposed to be something like $25 a year. For some reason, they never actually charged me for it. There was Kindle was supposed to be, I think, $25 a year at one time. I think they've gone to free.
Yeah.
And that's just, like I said, that's just to get on those channels. After that, when it comes to the actual development kits that I'm using for developing video games, let's see, $150 a year for the engine. Let's see, how much am I spending a year on Creative Suite? Whatever a good copy of Adobe Photoshop, essentially.
They spend, because you have those yearly licenses now, don't you? Where before they used to have you just buy it outright for something like horrendous, like $2,000 to $3,000. Now, yearly they do something different where it's like I believe it's like 350 or something for a yearly license.
Yeah, it depends on what route you're going. They've got a Photoshop only route that's fairly cheap. I think it's $19 a year or $19 a month,
Yeah.
all the way up to the full Creative Cloud setup, which is $50 a month. And it's pricey, but a good set of tools it's hard to beat a good set of tools. Oddly enough, like the artwork for Jumpman Forever, I have Photoshop. I've used it a little bit on this project, but not very much. Most of it has actually been done. Most of the graphics have actually been done in a product called Sprite Something, which is an iPad and desktop app that is designed very specifically for working with old 2D style sprites. So there ends up being the cost of doing it. It's how much you want to spend. There's some things that you're going to have to, if you want to be an iOS developer, you're going to have to spend $100 a year. But when it comes to the tool sets, I choose Photoshop because I like Photoshop. I could use GIMP instead, or Pixelmator, or a number of other ones. So some of the choices you make is you save time here by trading it off for money. So.
Well, let me ask you a big question, something that you don't have to answer, of course, but how lucrative is it to actually develop for iOS devices? How is it a good market? Is it something that you could live off of?
Yeah. My living is iOS development and web development right at the moment. Now, keep in mind, I also do Android development, and nobody wants to give me money for Android development. And it's a stigma issue rather than anything else. Android versus iOS, and you can have all the fights and debates about which one's the better. For all I care, it's about where the paychecks are and where the money's being spent. Right now, people who own iOS devices classically spend more money than people who own Android devices. Could change in the future. It can be lucrative, but it has to be right product, right place, right marketing, or in my case, because somebody else has paid me to develop that product.
Yeah. So as you said, you've got licenses. You work with these channels. You hold the you have sort of like the app development advantage on it. What do in terms, because you're not just a programmer very much, though, are you? You're more everything as well, because you've managed to train yourself to do graphics, to do the programming side, to do all these other facets of what makes a game. How tricky was that?
That took a while. Let's take one facet. The first game I did that I did my own audio for, let's see, Boulder Panic, when I did it, I had bought a CD that was 10,000 sounds or something like this, and just tried to find something that kind of sounded like it should. With the next game I did, I was literally in the basement with a bucket, some glass, some eggs, some rocks, a hammer, and sitting there trying to make noises that sounded like they should in my head, that this is what it should sound like. Well, I figured out that that's not the route to go. So there's two games right there that I've already found, that's not the route that's going to work. Eventually got into some sound development tools, which they can be expensive depending on what you're using. Got into some sound development tools that I finally started producing sounds that I thought were worthwhile for the games I was working on. So it took a good amount of time. Honestly, had I attended a college for doing sound engineering, I would have been further ahead. It probably took me 4 game releases till I finally got the hang of sound development for it. So depending on your point of view, it's a really expensive process because time is kind of expensive. So yeah, it's just all these processes are that way. The process of teaching yourself graphics. Okay, I was somebody that grew up doing hand sketches and things like that, so I had a little bit of functional understanding of the process of developing a 2D piece of paper artwork. Well, how does that translate into a computer? Well, don't just scan it in there and try it. That's not going to work. it became a long process. What tools is it that works? And, well, again, multiple game releases before I finally found the tools that I liked. The whole process can be fairly expensive when it comes from either time or money standpoint, and it's a long thing.
So, in terms of that, then, did you utilize these functions, like these new skills that you've had, because you wanted more control over the games that you've been working on, or did you just do it because was it like money or time constraints or any other reason? Because I don't get why you would focus all that time developing all these other skills. Well, I do get why you would do that, but when there are other people out there that you could outsource this to, like what you're doing with Jumpman Forever, of course.
The best answer is because I can. The way that my brain is wired, a lot of things boil down to because I can. I'm going to give you a story that's a greatest example of me and because I can. Because of when I had the LAN Gaming Center, somebody had made an offhand comment about you should have a TV show. What they meant was I should be going on one of the TV shows that was happening locally, so as to advertise my LAN center a little better. What I heard was, you should have a TV show on this. And so, well, I don't know anything about TV. I knew just a little bit about editing. I had played with Final Cut Pro, for instance. This is back in the Mac G4 days. I had a 17-inch Power Mac, and with nothing more than just, well, sheer cojones, walked into the TV station and said, here's what we want to do. We want to do a television show on video games. They're like, okay, well, give us a pilot. We'll pick up two episodes as a pilot. So we did, and it was some of the worst television ever made. I'll be honest, it was horrible. And the third episode, it got better. And the fourth episode, it got better. And the fifth episode, it got much better. And the sixth episode, we're finally starting to get into it. So the way my brain is wired, I will set out to learn anything because it sounds like something I want to do and because I can. And yes, there is a little bit of cheap bastard involved in there too that, well, I don't want to have to pay somebody to do editing for me. I can do it myself. It shouldn't be any problem.
I totally agree, because that's how I generated most of my skills. I garnered most of my skills in terms of editing, video production, stuff like that as well. I maintained he was an actor previously. I just acted. That was me. I utilized my acting techniques. Went on stage, went in front of the camera, film, television, etc. But then, when I started my own production company, I was like, right, I've got to start editing. That's what I need to do. So I started with vlogs, YouTube videos, and stuff like that, and working my way around. And now I'm utilizing like bigger tools and stuff to sort of aid me in better productions. And this is the way that some brains are kind of wired, because you have to. It's better to learn something and develop a new skill than it is to rely on someone to do something. And if it's not what you wanted, you're going to kind of get pissed.
Absolutely. Plus, the other thing is, even if you do bring in a contractor, for instance, my understanding of graphic development for 3D games and 2D games both, because I sat down and done it, I've got a good idea what it takes, and I understand terminology. If the guy says he's going to be UV mapping, I know what that means. You're not going to pull the wool over my eyes that, well, this is going to cost a whole lot, because no, it's not. No, it's not. I know what it costs. I know what it takes. Plus, I can clearly communicate with the person that's doing it. So even in the times where I bring somebody in to do something, it's still benefited me in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's talk about personally, what is the game industry? What does it mean to you? Are you an avid player of games?
Oddly enough, not nearly as much as I used to be. The last thing I picked up was Grand Theft Auto 5. Loved it. I absolutely loved Grand Theft Auto 5. But there's a number of games that have come out that I'm not going to pick up because I don't have the time. And it becomes one of those paradoxes of doing game development for a lot of people. Play games or make games. Play games or make games. And the more time you spend playing them, the less time you spend making them.
Yeah.
But the more time you spend making them, the more disconnected you become from games and what's modern and understandable. So I love games. I don't play nearly as much as I used to. I also used to be a role player and would be over at friends' house on every Friday night playing Rifts or Palladium role-playing fantasy or D&D or one of these. Games are just part of my DNA. You know, I don't know why, but I just don't really get to enjoy them as much as I used to.
So let's ask you one more sort of question. While I keep saying that, but we keep going because it's been a really wonderful interview. Because I love finding more about yourself, of course, and what you've been up to in terms of developing this game. Because it also allows our fans, not just from Nerd Genius, but from everywhere around the world, who hasn't seen this video or haven't who even donated and that don't know much about yourself, to get to know you a little bit, because they're not just buying into your product in a sense, they're buying into you. They want to know who you are and what you can do, which is a great thing. I think for myself as well, stories are the best part of life in general. You get to hear everyone's stories, you get to find out more about them, and you get to talk to people about their certain environments where they came from and what led them into sort of gaming and any career path that they choose. And that's one reason why I wanted to do this, because I wanted to find out more about you face to face and sort of put a name and face to the product in general. But for other indie game developers, for anyone else who wants to do this, who wants to become a developer, what's the advice that you'd give them? What was the main thing you'd say for them to go out and do if they wanted to, say, make their very own version of Jumpman Forever, or if they wanted to find an IP and make that themselves?
Honestly, that's a question I get quite often. What do I need to do to get into game development? I usually look at them and say, run. Don't do it. But point out that's a joke, because it's a hard field to break into when it comes to being an indie and getting some success at it. It's very much going to be a case of a little bit of luck at times. For most people, if they're already playing games, playing good 3D games that have an editor, I tell them, get into modding. Get into modding. Do some really detailed stuff to thoroughly understand and get it out into the community so that you get a feel for that whole feedback loop that happens with game development and the users. And then on top of that, that gives you something to show. Let's say you want to go work for somebody.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, there's a lot of people who go get degrees, and there's a lot of people who are very disappointed when they go get degrees because it doesn't really get them what they wanted.
Yeah.
On the other hand, having a portfolio that's playable. This is what I did. This is this was based around Unreal Tournament. I did a full complete conversion for this. It's actually now medieval and yada yada yada. Being able to show that you can work as a team, being able to show that you can finish a product, and boy, you can never underestimate how important that is to a game development company or a publisher. The fact that you can finish a product, that you can ship it, and that you can interface with the community. Those are skills that game development companies are very much interested in. On top of that, if you're going to be an indie, those same skills right there are going to be what make you live or die. In indies who start games and don't finish them, and I've got prototypes that I have laying around that I check a game out and I don't like where that's going to go. We're not going to do that one. Mm-hmm. And I end up going knowing that there's always a risk that I'm not going to finish that one. But there's a lot of indies who go out there with the idea, I'm going to do this game, and we're going to ship it, and this is going to be awesome, and they get a quarter of the way in, half the way in, and they give up and they walk away. That's something that publishers and game development companies don't want to see. And as an indie, it means that you put all this money into it time-wise, and you got nothing in return. Ship it. That's always a big thing.
So for that, for anybody else that goes in there and wants to do it, it's a great thing because it's, as I said, it's passion. You know, you have to have passion to do this, and you've got to be willing to kind of what's the word I want to use, to basically starve for your creativity, for what you're building here, which is one thing that I see that you've done. You know, you've trudged, you strove to do what you could, what you wanted to do, and you're kind of reaping the benefits from it at the moment. Not entirely 100% what you want, of course, but you are, you know, you're making a good living off of it. So let me ask you another question. This one's about YouTube. What do you think the importance of having Let's Players, people out there playing your games and showing your games off to the general public, even if it's like positive or negative reviews? Do you think this is a good thing?
It's no more than just a good thing. It's a key thing. Jumpman Forever. It's hard for us to get the word out, for instance. But if somebody's motivated and they like the game and they play the game, they put pieces of gameplay up on YouTube and they Reddit about it and all these things, that makes all the difference in the world. So yeah, no, I'm all for, even when it's negative. As a game developer, there's going to be somebody who hates what I do, and that's okay. There was, I can't remember where it was at. There was a forum post that somebody had pointed out to me that somebody disliked what I was doing with Jumpman Forever because I was not porting it back to the Commodore 64. Not kidding. A platform that's not really been viable, still runs, it's just not been viable as a commercial alternative for a very long time.
But saying that, though, you do have, I don't know if you've seen the Gamester 81 game. He's ported that thing. That's only released on the ColecoVision. No other console has it.
Yeah, there is a market. There's a niche market for some of that, and every once in a while they actually do fairly decent.
But you must be paying a premium for something like that, though. Because
I wouldn't want to do it.
All the old cartridges and the old designs, you know, it's not like basically putting a game out on digital download and letting people download it. You're putting it on a cartridge, and you can only sell like so many quantities. Plus, as you've said, it's a niche market, so you ended up paying a premium for something like that.
Oh, absolutely, and it's definitely not the area for me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do, actually, and the truth is like Commodore 64, programming for it was so much simpler than the modern equivalents. But on the other hand, if I release this game on the Commodore 64, maybe 1,000 people will end up playing it. Where if I do it with iOS, PC, Mac, Android, and Ouya, there'll be 10 to 100 times that many people play it. You know, we can get into piracy rates and all that sort of stuff, but it's definitely not the same thing. But the point is that there's, no matter what you do, no matter what choices you make, you better expect to have a thick skin if somebody's going to be, you know, putting posts up on YouTube about your game, because there's going to be some people that are just going to say that game sucks. That game sucks and I hate the graphics. That game sucks, I hate the graphics, and I hope that guy dies in a fire. YouTube and some of those channels are just notorious for that. You just have to accept it and move on. But it is very beneficial, because even if that guy is a jerk, the 10 people who saw it that weren't jerks, those were your audience anyways.
That's true. So let me sort of clarify and push that statement a little bit further. What do you think about gaming companies putting copyright claims to these videos? Do you think that's fair on the Let's Players? Do you think, you know, yourself as a gamer and also as a developer, would you put a claim to somebody who's playing your game?
I could not imagine as a game developer that I would want to make a copyright claim against the game that's being played. If my game is being played and shown off to other people, that is other people who could potentially buy it. This is what I want. This is called marketing. And any developer who shuts that down is essentially shutting down their marketing department. Why? thoroughly confused by this one. Now, the whole debacle with YouTube and their gaming copyright claims is there's been a couple of companies come forward and said we didn't have anything to do with this. I don't know why YouTube is yanking them down. This wasn't our thing. And I don't know how much truth there is to it one way or another, whether there's Yahoo or Google being a little oversensitive, or whether or not it's these guys coming back later and kind of re-editing the truth. But yeah, no, I can't imagine. That's where I want my stuff. I want people to see it. I wouldn't be writing games if I didn't want people to see it.
Do you think it's all about that whole piece of the pie thing that, you know, like you look at videos and these royalties, and most of these videos only make chump change in terms of the royalties that you get from them. You know, if you're looking at someone who's only making 100 views, for instance, or 1,000 views, they're not really going to get that much of a cut from it. Now, in my opinion, what I've looked at this situation, it seems more of Google trying to force the Let's Players out of YouTube, in a sense, because there's no way to sort of legislate copyright effectively with these types of things, because, you know, nowadays gaming has become a big phenomenon in terms of the television, in terms of like streaming and stuff like that, and YouTube, as we've stated, has become that kind of bridge between TV and internet now. And, you know, everybody and their mum wants to do a gaming show, so everyone does a Let's Play or commentary and talks about certain games and bits and pieces. It makes things more difficult because you've got companies like Nintendo who say, well, we're not going to give you authorization to use our stuff or to play our games and show it to people because we think it diminishes sales. Where, as you've stated, quite the contrary, it actually promotes you. It's free promotion. You know, it's better than paying for ad revenue with companies or paying video game like sites and stuff to advertise for you. All you need to do is just give it to a Let's Player, show them what the game's about, tell them what you think, and that will sell the game for us.
And I think you might have hit on part of the problem when you were saying that a minute ago. Because let's face it, if you have a marketing department, their job is to sell the product, but they're also there to protect their own interests.
Yeah.
If the game sells itself too well on YouTube just by releasing some YouTube videos and having some players have copies of the game, well, you wouldn't need as much marketing money. Well, I could see where marketing might go talk to legal at that point to kind of hush up a little bit of the YouTube chatter that's going on. And I think that companies and developers and particularly the big players in the industry don't quite get the disruptive technology that's going on with YouTube and all of those. I don't think they quite get it and how to really truly leverage it. They want control over it, so that they control their appearance. Where it'd be better off if the gamers controlled their appearance to a certain degree.
Yeah. Could that be the same suggestiveness as you stated, that you've had a hard time working with third-party developers? Is it because of stuff like that? Is it because it's a chain of command and the fact that not everybody understands the whole ideals of selling games or putting games together? Because, you know, you could have situations where a marketing person, for instance, may understand how to market a product, but they won't understand what it means, what a game would mean to the average buyer, or how development of a game. You could have a third-party company say, and again, this is with Deep Silver and Last Light, for example. They ended up basically taking Metro: The Last Light and say, okay, what we're going to do is the increased difficulty version of this game you have to pay extra for. That's DLC when it's not.
Yeah, no, that's not. Everybody's so worried about trying to make an extra buck off of their revenue streams, which, you know, Rockstar just showed what exactly you need to do. Produce a solid game.
Yeah.
Give it to the community, and the community, yeah, you'll make a buck easily.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand that Rockstar put a lot of money into marketing, but, you know, they produced such a solid product with that game that even the gamers that had a problem with the game 2 months later, they were just completely enamored when that first came out with how awesome this game is, and then they say later it's a little short or it's more the same thing as it was before. But yeah, produce a solid product and don't worry about what the rest of the gaming industry is going to say about it. Don't worry about trying to make bigger revenues through downloadable content or the frickin' freemium game style, which even some of the bigger titles are starting to eyeball.
Yeah.
Especially the MMOs. It's nickel and diming a player. I don't mind the freemium stuff so badly because they at least are upfront about it. This is what you're going to get, and we're going to get you this stuff here later if you want it. But if I go out and buy a game and it's missing a big chunk of the game, like say hard mode,
yeah,
and I got to pay for that, no, that's just being a jerk.
Yeah,
that's being too greedy.
No, I totally agree, and I think this is the problem. Is like because of new certain because we basically society has been turned on its head in general when it comes to gaming, because you have these new accessible ways to get into the industry now. Before, you had to know someone who was within a company in order to get yourself a meeting, in order to get something seen and get your talents out there. Whereas now, you don't have to do that. You can do that on your own. That your success is determined by you and you alone.
Yeah.
And the big thing with these game companies now is there's no ideals or options. They're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm gonna just drain as much as I can to get the biggest buck that I can out of this game, when they don't understand that they're hurting their product. Capcom, I'm going to use them as another example. They basically are losing money at the moment. They're not making as much as they should do in terms of their IPs and their franchises because they're not listening. They've just stopped listening. I think the only positive thing I can see about Capcom was when they said about YouTube putting in copyright claims on their behalf, saying, no, that wasn't us. We'll we'll help you. And that's it. Everybody else though is just going apeshit, and it's a shame because you've got companies like Ubisoft who they do really good games. They've got a lovely story going on with the Assassin's Creed franchise, of course, and they're going to be releasing one of the biggest games ever at the moment, which was what was it called? The open world game. I'm trying to, off the top of my head, I can't remember. But they're going to be releasing Watch Dogs. That was it. They're going to be releasing that eventually, and that's one of the big reasons I was going to buy PS4, but kind of stopped because they went, no, we're not going to release that now. You're going to have to wait for that. That's not going to be a console release. That's not going to be released in time with the console itself. So yeah, sorry about that. You can have Killzone or Knack, one of those two games. And I think that's the problem. Companies are tending not to look at the consumer anymore and understand what the consumer want. And that's why a lot of people are going to these Kickstarter formats, because they want to help indie developers make their way back into the industry. Like with Concept and Mighty Number 9, people wanted that Mega Man game, and Kenji Inafune came in and said, hey, you know what? I'll give you that Mega Man game, but you've got to help me out. And they were already established. They were doing bipartisan work for other companies. They released about 5 or 6 different games before they came in as their own company. And Concept themselves, again, even with a few little bits of backlash that's going on in terms of the situation that they are currently in, they're still in very high regard in terms of being the company that people see. And hopefully, the Mighty Number 9 thing is going to spawn a whole new franchise of games that are kind of Mega Man related, which turns the whole thing and puts it on its head. But in terms of indie development and what you're doing, there is a chance with games like this and with Jumpman Forever, it could mean a situation where if you greatly benefit from this, you could put it forward to creating a more user-orientated company, something that focuses on the fans.
Yeah, and there's always an interesting thing with dealing with fans, because there's what fans say they want, and they swear up and down this is what they want, and then there's what they really want, And it's funny because sometimes when you give fans what they want, you have to be careful because you'll give the minority what they want when the majority was good with how things were. And you have to be careful with that. The most vocal in a community, both for games and outside of it, typically speak for the smallest amount.
Yeah.
We tend to forget that. With game development, it's very much the same way, and you have to be careful. But on the other hand, don't completely ignore the audience. Eventually, they're going to walk away. They're going to find something else more entertaining. If you completely ignore everything that they're doing, we're not going to release another one because we just don't think there's people there. Well, then you're not going to make any money off of it, period. And to pick on Capcom a little bit there, I mean, really, it's Mega Man. It's a 2D side-scroller shooting game. It's shooting fish in a barrel. It's not. Mega Man is not built on a set of fundamentals that are so tight. Actually, it's mainly just a thing of extremely hard boss battles with a whole lot of side jump and run and shoot in between. It's not so hard of a game that they couldn't have done it. That I would almost bet that to get it to development time before you get it to market, they were probably only looking at $200,000, and then their distribution for another $250,000 to $400,000 in distribution and marketing, just to get it to fans. Which sounds like, for me, in an indie, this is a whole lot of money. We're getting close to, we're over $500,000 in production costs and everything there. But to a company like them, that's really not that big. And so I'm really surprised that they didn't capitalize on their intellectual property and keep going down the road with it. In fact, some of those companies are so focused on sequels that we drown in them. How many modern combats do we need?
Resident Evils, yeah. I agree on that one. It's like how far can you go until the story eventually ends? You can't stretch a story out until the point where you just don't know where to go because you're going to end up backing yourself into a corner. But I do agree.
In fact, actually, that's one of the things I appreciated about Halo 1, 2, and 3 is that the story came to an end. There was a plot line, and it ended. It was great. Now that they started again with Halo 4, which I haven't picked up.
Isn't that continuing? Because from what I've been told, it continues from the third game, but it's just like, okay, this is what's happened. Oh, there's a worse thing going on there, and it just continues the story again. And it's like where they kind of wrapped up. 343 came in and was like, no, we're just going to untangle that, demystify that, and then push it even further. When truthfully they could have just pushed an alternate reality project or done something seriously different with the character.
Yeah.
But they chose against it, and I understand totally. It's one of those things where you sit there and go, why this or why this? What are we trying to do here? And I think that's the intricacies of Jumpman, for instance. There was never a true sequel. There was all these other sort of games that spawned off of it.
And Randy Glover himself actually did one called Jumpman Jr., and he says it's not a sequel. Yeah. It's actually a light version because he needed something that fit better on some of the console requirements that was lower memory. So Jumpman Jr., for instance, only had 12 levels versus the 30 that the original Jumpman did. So it ended up not even being a true sequel from the original author either.
So, with Jumpman Forever, would you call this an official sequel, or would you call this as something that just spawns off the original?
No, it's a sequel. It kind of picks up with the ideas. If there's no Jumpman plot line, for instance. Like I said, there's just some smart marketing spiel that got slapped together. So to call it a sequel is, I suppose, in some ways disingenuous, but that's what I view it as a true sequel. It's just, the thing is, there's no plot line in the original, so you saved Jupiter Station, yay. Now the sequel, we're back at Jupiter Station again. I'm not sure exactly how that works out.
So what would you say if you wanted to put together a legacy of Jumpman video games and the reasoning behind the game itself in a time where there is story-based games. Do you think people need to make that themselves to create that story aspect so that they can play the game, or do you think it's just one of those games which is just entirely fun to play, which is what the Atari and the NES and all these old sort of 8-bit consoles used to be like?
My approach is going to be that levels, for instance, on Jumpman Forever are a very immediate experience. There's not a whole lot of storytelling involved. There's no complicated plot line. But because we've got a 2-year development plan for it when it comes to releasing more levels, over time, there is going to be little shades of a plot line. And for those who want to explore that idea and explore the Jumpman universe, for lack of a better term, there is something there for those players. But for most people, it's just going to be an experience where it's still console gaming. There's not a plot line to Pac-Man. You eat dots, you avoid ghosts, you eat power pellets, you eat those ghosts. There's a sense of immediacy to it rather than this long, arcing, epic tale. And I don't have a problem with either approach to gaming. I'm going more towards the Pac-Man route with just little hints here and there of what the potential plot line is, and for those who care, they can connect the dots themselves.
Okay. Finally, I'll put out with the new downloadable, like with the new levels that you're going to be putting out for it. Are these going to be DLC that you have to pay for, or are they going to be free DLC for the game itself?
What my plan is for the first 2 years, we're not going to do any for pay DLC. It'll be free. That's the plan. I feel it to be I feel it rude. If you spend money on my game and you like the game, I want to give you more stuff and keep you playing the game. Okay? I don't really think I should be asking you to open your wallet again to continue playing the game if you found it cool. I have a game that I thought that I play from time to time called Tower Madness. Love this little game. It's a little tower defense game for the iPad and the iPhone. That I think their approach was great. They took and they have downloadable level packs that are for pay, and they also have ones that are free that they just put as part of their updates. It allows me as a player to make the conscious choice, you know what, I enjoy the game and I get to keep playing it. Or I enjoy the game, I get to keep playing it, and I'll give them 99 cents for another pack of levels, I guess, For Jumpman Forever, we really want to keep the core. We don't want anybody to have to pay again for the downloadable content for at least 2 years.
Yeah.
After 2 years, we can re-explore it. But, part of that depends on sales. If we sell 5 copies of it, then it would be a must to pay for downloadable content, because 5 copies, we're just not making enough off the initial sale. Though the Kickstarter itself defrays a whole lot of that expense problem. If it was just that the Kickstarter made, and we make our money on the Kickstarter, and we funded the development, but we only sold, in the 5 figures or 4 figures for the number of copies, a year from now we might look at charging for downloadable content. But part of our goal is we don't want people to have to do that anyways.
Yeah.
With the level editor and with the cloud-based file sharing community that we're going to be using inside of it, even if we produce downloadable content that is for sale, and if it is, it's going to be cheap, I'll tell you that. If we produce stuff that's for sale, we still want to keep the community going. So the level editor for people to create their own levels, and the file sharing community for them to deal with their own stuff, and everybody have access to it. Even if we produce downloadable content that costs 2 years down the road, there's always going to be more free content out there, and I think that's probably in a lot of ways it's a better proposition.
Yeah, I agree. Because in the end of the day, like with again games like Halo, for instance, you can purchase packs for it, but you can also create your own. People create their own little service for Minecraft and stuff like that, and that's one of the reasons why Minecraft got so big. It was because people were able to create their own little variations of that.
Yeah.
And Mojang loved the idea so much they actually incorporated that into their own games. So it's like, yeah, bring your servers over, get people to join your servers. It's still part of our world, but it's your server, and that's kind of what made the game so unique in its own sort of sense. And I think with Jumpman Forever, you know, from what I've seen, from what I've played so far, and when I do my my long play tomorrow, I really hope good things for this game. I really hope that it does. The Kickstarter does push its boundaries and gets the amount of money that it should do for this, because, you know, when we last talked, it was on like $7,000. Now it's on 700-800, which is great. But you know, I honestly want you to get to that 20 grand, because I think this is one of those games which has the potential to do a hell of a lot of good. So guys and girls out there, if you check this game out, you want to have a look at the Kickstarter, I will be leaving the link on the YouTube page that's hosted by this, on Retro Unlim, of course, Fanboys Anonymous, if you guys want to actually check it out on there as well, and also on our various Facebook channels. I got gameplay, Nerd Genius, nerdgenius.com. And if you want to talk to Davis as well, you can do. He's going to be on the Exodus Gaming Podcast this Tuesday with Xander Scullion, one of my co-hosts for Michael Gameplay, and we'll be on Retro Unlim Live next week as well, or we can say this week because it's Sunday now, with a flurry of our hosts as well, and that'll be hosted by Scott Bailey, aka the Console Snob. So make sure, guys, get your questions in for him. He's a great guy. I admire what you're doing, Davis. You know, from someone else who's trying to live his dreams and do everything I can and trying to help the gaming industry as much as I can as well. I'm glad that we were able to sit down and chat and talk about exactly, you know, Jumpman Forever and everything that you're trying to do, because it means a lot, you know. And for those people who live and breathe the gaming industry, guys like myself, of course, and everybody else out there on Facebook and YouTube, etc., who like to show their opinions on the gaming forums, it does mean a lot that someone's actually taken something that people love so much and is trying to make a variation of it, you know, a new version of it that everyone can love to play, you know. And it's for everybody, guys. You know, it's not just for the Ouya guys who own the Ouya. It's for those guys who want to get a game stick, who own an Android device, who own an Apple device. You can take this on the go with you, and you know, Davis is going to do everything he can to make sure that each and every one of you get something out of this game. So check out the deals. We can go through those. Actually, let's go through those at the moment and talk about, before we finish, the deals that everyone can get using the Kickstarter, because I'm on the Kickstarter page at the moment. Now, the way that this works, guys, if you haven't done Kickstarter before, it's pretty easy. If you do $1 or more and you're backing here, you get Davis's thanks, and you know, for helping him get this game out. If you're going to do $2 or more,
hey, Michael, hang on just 1 second. Because everybody is going to get something more than actually is on that list. The person that gives $1, for instance, yeah, they get my thanks. Hey, thanks. But also, we're shipping to everybody who does it. We're shipping the preview copy of Jumpman Forever, a preview for PC and Mac. So even if you give $1, we still going to give you at least that much.
Is it online, or are you going to be doing it via physical copies?
It's online. We're giving a download link and a password to the download, and away you go.
There you go, guys. So there you go. Even if you're donating $1 or more, you can actually get a preview copy of this, so you could beta test this game, get it out on your YouTube channels, show it to your friends. So donate. It's only $1. You know, that people can find that around in their couches somewhere. Get that $1 out there, and I'm going to donate my money to this as well. I'm going to do that in a moment before we finish the stream. If you pledge $3 or more, you get an early buyer's reward as well. Basically, you get like an early shipped version and an early buyer reward. So that's awesome. If you do $10 or more, which is what I'm looking at to donate on this, you get a beta tester reward, of course, but that's out to everybody now.
Well, the preview copy is not the same as the beta.
Oh,
the
okay.
Preview copy only has 8 levels.
Explain the difference between the beta and the preview copy.
The preview copy it's only 8 levels. And here's what happened. a number of people were bugging me. They wanted to check out the game, especially so that they could put it on their YouTube channels or pictures for their articles, things like that. They didn't want to have to depend on the stuff I had released, which I don't blame them. And so what I did is I put together a version that is just a limited cut-down version. There's only 8 levels. There's you don't have access to all 5 game modes. The second character isn't in there. Number of things like that. Now the beta, when you get into the betas, you're going to have all the levels, which when the Ouya version comes out, that's 30 levels. When the PC Mac version comes out, that'll be a grand total of 60 levels. So it's a very limited subset to just kind of whet your appetite is what the preview copy is about. Instead of giving you the full thing and you having to support bug releases and all that. Nah. This is just for you to get to check it out.
So there you go, guys. So you get the preview copy. Only contains a small amount of levels. So if you're donating $1 or more, you get that. If you're basically donating $10 or more, you get a beta tested copy of this. So you can actually beta test it as the full levels, and you can basically go back and talk about the bugs, etc., what's going on with the game. So that's awesome. Let's continue and talk about the rest that come with this. I'm going to be donating my money in a second. Because I'm going to be going for the $10 version. I'm just going to try and bring it back up. For some reason, my screen's crashed. Lovely. Alright, here we go. So basically, if you could donate $25 plus, you get a Jumpman Christmas card. And you also basically, is this a copy that you get to give to your friends?
Yeah. What the idea is that you get a code for it. And when it's released on Ouya or when it's released on the other platforms, they can exchange that code that's right in there for a copy of the game. So they're getting a cool Christmas card and a copy of the game they can give away. Oddly enough, at least 2 of the people who have bought the Christmas cards have talked to me and said, no, that's just for me. They wanted the Christmas cards themselves as a collector's item, and it's signed, and there's a limited edition and all this stuff. So
there you go, guys. If you want basically a signed Christmas card, you can have that as well. Then you got the $50 or more pledge, which is done by 2 backers at the moment. Hopefully we're going to be getting some more on that. You get an exclusive content reward. So just talk about the exclusive content there. What's that?
What I'm doing is putting together 12 levels that nobody else can split. Those backers are the only ones that get to play those levels, and it was just a way of doing something that's kind of like, well, what do I give somebody who really likes the game and wants to do something kind of cool and different? So I'll break down and produce some actually fairly interesting levels for that. Probably going to be something insanely hard, knowing me. I like doing hard levels.
So the $100 or more, that basically has everything, including the exclusive content, the Christmas card reward to that as well, and also you get like the extra levels, the beta copy, and also the final version when that gets shipped.
Yep.
So that's a big one for you guys. There's one for 256, which is a limited edition Jumpman animation cell prints. So let's talk about that a little bit.
I'm probably going to be the only one that actually owns one of these because it's going to. The idea was I really wanted to do a print of just take and basically blow up the existing big pixely things and do a print that had the character and the character bio essentially, and I just wanted for my wall is what I wanted, one of each. And I started looking at that and I was like, it'd be kind of cool to give other people have access to the chance, and there's enough animation cells between the 2 characters to do it very easily. So yeah, it's basically a signed limited edition print. There is only one of each cell being produced, so whatever one you get, that's the only one that's being produced. So
there you go, guys. It's another limited edition treat for all you gamer collectors out there who want to actually get a copy of this and want some exclusive deals here. So $500 or more, that gives you the Your Level Here reward. So what's that about?
That is my answer to everybody who tells me, well, you know what you really need? A level that has sharks, or a level that has, you know what, for $500 I will make you that level. It's almost, yes, I would sincerely do this. If somebody bought it, I would do it. But quite honestly, it's me being a bit of a smartass. It's using the rewards to say, look, if you really want me to do that level for you, I'll do it, but it's going to cost you.
If you want a level with jumping killer penguins, you have to basically spend $500 for that, guys, which I think is a good deal. Don't get me wrong, you are contributing to a game here that's going to look awesome. And if you want killer penguins, that will be exclusively. Is that exclusively for them, or can they roll it out to others?
Oh, it becomes part of the game. It's not just theirs; it's for everybody at that point.
Awesome. And then you got the $1,000 or more pledge, which is the ultimate Jumpman fan box in the 80s games that come in fancy boxes and not electronic downloads. So explain a bit more about this one.
This one is basically grab everything that a lot of the old style games had, like Infocom. When you bought one of their games, you had a game box, CD, or well, actually floppies. Or
so is that one of those huge boxes like you see with the Amiga 500 and stuff?
Exactly. And then on top of that, like with Infocom, you might have, I remember one of them had glow-in-the-dark rock and a map. And so what it is basically I'm trying to recreate that experience. Part of it, there's a booklet in there that is the artwork of Jumpman. Which is a lot of the levels and things like that bound together as a kind of something to put on your counter. It's got a figurine in there. It's got the actual printed box to go up on your wall or your shelf. Because right back here, there's going to be one of them on my shelf. When I'm done, it's going to be on my shelf. They're signed copies, and honestly, the other thing is they actually have physical media in them. They have flash drive. They'll have a flash drive that has the actual copy of the game rather than just the electronic download. Which, by the way, for those people who own iPhones, you realize that's not going to work. I'm going to have it on there. The IPA file will be on there, but you have no way of putting it on your phone. You'll still get a code for the beta. You'll still get a code for the final version of the game and all that good stuff. It's really a tribute to what games used to be. That they packed them so full of stuff that was cool. And it's not to say games don't do that at all now. There are some games that still do, and some games that now produce $500 the limited edition boxes that come in the Halo element or what have you. So it's also kind of a nod to some of the modern stuff that's going on.
Okay, and the 2,500 pledge for the in-game supporter link. So talk a bit about that one for us.
That is actually, in my mind, $2,500 when you hit there and from on up. Those are corporate level rewards. Okay. My goal was to go out and sell some of these, which we'll see one of them has sold here in a minute. The idea being to go hook some big fish on the idea, look, you guys spend a lot of money on advertising. I got one that's going to last a very long time, and it's going to be on iPhone, it's going to be on iPad, it's going to be on Android tablets, it's going to be on desktops, it's going to be on their home TVs with the Ouya, it's going to be. So it was. This is the lowest entry level version of that. For $2,500, I put a link to your website and or product or even your phone number, whatever you want, and a short blurb about it. And instead of it being first come, first serve, actually every time somebody hits that page inside the app reorders which ones are being shown where, so that there's no preference on who's first or who's last. It's just random every time.
Is that the beginning of the game or the end of the game?
That's actually just from a menu item in the game. Supporters. I think it's supporters and ads is what it is.
Awesome. So you've got the third splash page, which is 7,000. That's pretty much the same as the fourth one. So you're going up in the ranking.
Yeah. So you'll have fourth for 6,000. 7,000 gives you the third. 8,000 gives you the second splash page, and 9,000 gives you the first. Basically, the splash page is every time you load a game these days, you have to wait 15 seconds for sponsored by Invita and dit. It's the same thing, except for I'm just giving companies a chance to get it.
It's like Cool Spot being, supported by 7-Up.
Yes. And so far we have one corporate supporter that's in there, and we've had another one that we've been talking to that's supposed to be buying one of those ads. So hopefully Monday or Tuesday they do that.
Yeah, hopefully they get it, because you've only got 6 days to go, guys. And for those of you who want to support the project, please do. You can minimum $1. $1 doesn't hurt your wallet, and $1 doesn't, sit there and piss people off because they're not getting anywhere. It's only $1, so do that. Back this project, because it means a lot to Davis. It means a lot to every gamer out there. In the end, supporting independent companies and independent gaming means you have a lot more choice. By not supporting these guys, you're gonna give these guys no opportunity to get out there, and also to the point where you're gonna end up having the big companies take control of works where, these labors of love, in a sense. And plus, you get a preview copy. Look at this. Any person that supports this game gets a preview copy of Jumpman Forever, so you can test it, you can play it, you can show people what you think of the game before it goes out on open beta. That's a big thing here. I know I'm supporting my $10. Make sure you support, guys. And Davis, I want to say a great big thank you for this interview today. It's been amazing. I know we've had a few hiccups. Thanks to the Google Plus platform, and it's Google. What do you expect? But we have, the fact that this has been able to give us sort of accessibility to interview you today, because we're both off the opposite channels of the pond, of course.
Yes.
It does help, and it's been an amazing couple of hours, talking to you, going through everything about this game, and I really do wish the best for you. We're going to roll out as well some advertising for you on nerdgenius.com as well. IGG is going to try and pull some advertising out, get people out there, get people talking about this. Remember, guys, he's on Tuesday next week on the Access Gaming Podcast. He's on Retro Unlim, which is Retro Unlim 19. We're going to be posting a link on my Facebook page on I Got Gameplay. If you want to join up with Icon Gameplay, you can do at facebook.com/I Got Gameplay. And remember, guys, from Davis, from myself, for each and every one of you out there, just know that we have gameplay. Have you?